Thanks for having a quick conversation with us today. We wanted to have our public and our employees understand more about MGT. Tell us a little bit first about MGT Consulting and why are we using a third party?
Thank you, Kimberly. That's a big topic right now, district reconfiguration, what that may look like. The board has been studying for some time this idea of reconfiguring the district. We discussed the need to have a third party look at the variables associated with this. So last summer, we finalized the RFP, request for proposal, around October and began giving them information. The reason we went with MGT, they're professional, they're outside of the state, can give an unbiased look, and we felt confident in the information they would give the board to consider.
So what do we hope to get from them?
We really want the Board of Education to get the best information they can so that they can make a wise decision on whether or not to put a reconfiguration on the ballot, and if they do, what is the best reconfiguration to put before the voters. It's also an opportunity for the voters, our patrons, our employees, our elected officials to get good information about the current configuration of Alpine School District, some of the strengths and challenges associated with that, and then possible reconfiguration and what would that look like.
Okay, so if MGT makes to the public 6 options, does that mean that they're going to say this is the option we believe the Board of Education should consider, or how will they go about that?
So right now, based upon the presentation that they gave last week in study session, they have looked at 6 viable options. They will come back next week and give that presentation to a series of different audiences. We'll have public meetings each night. We'll meet with our elected officials during the day, our employees as well. They will share this information. They will get feedback on those 6 options and other variables associated with reconfiguration. Their intention is to take all of that information and then come up with a recommendation for the Board of Education to consider.
Okay, so next week is not the final determiner.
There's really 3 phases in this. There's the initial phase of them recommending some possibilities, getting feedback on that from the Board of Education and from staff, coming and presenting those recommendations, getting feedback from employees and patrons, elected officials, and then taking all that information and giving recommendations. So next week is really phase 2 of the work that MGT is going to do. They will be on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. We try to get locations throughout the district to make it easy for our patrons to attend. Tuesday night will be at Timpanogos High School. Wednesday will be at Vista Heights Middle School in Saratoga Springs, and then Thursday night will be at American Fork Junior High. We anticipate the format will be a presentation by MGT, so they will start right on the hour with a presentation of information to those attending, and then they have told us that there will be opportunities for patrons to interact. We asked them to bring their device because they're going to read a QR code and then be able to interact with the presentation that has been shared with them, and then give feedback on that presentation. After the presentation, there will be a series of questions that show up on the screen, and patrons can share their voice, perspective, opinion about those different configurations specifically, and then generally what do they think about Alpine School District and the possibility of reconfiguration.
Okay, so you just outlined to us phase 2, which are next week's meetings on the 12th, 13th, and 14th. What would be considered phase 3?
In our understanding, they will send out the presentation with a voiceover that people can receive, and we'll email that out to our patrons throughout the district, and they'll have an opportunity to listen to that and then answer some questions with respect to that and give their feedback on that presentation and district reconfiguration options. We'll also send it out to all of our 10,000 employees to get feedback from them as well. That would be the 3rd phase, MGT gathering that data, disaggregating that data, and then presenting that to the Board of Education. I would anticipate somewhere around the first part of April.
Let's shift to now, what does a district reconfiguration look like? Who governs that? Is there state statute? I know that the legislature just closed their session last week. What have we learned?
The legislative session just ended, and there were some legislative changes made to district reconfiguration. Those become effective May 1st. That new law allows the board to go directly to ballot. Previously, they had to go through the county commission to be able to put an initiative on the ballot. Now they're able to go directly to ballot. And there's some timing with respect to that that they will need to follow. Given the new legislation, the board has the responsibility to get this to ballot if they decide to do so. That would require them to make a recommendation, open it up for 45 days of public input, have 2 public hearings, and then make a final recommendation. The board is also required to do a feasibility study as outlined in state statute. That hasn't changed with the new legislation. And what MGT is doing satisfies the legal requirements of that feasibility study.
Okay, so that's a lot of weight to carry as a board member there, and likely the reason why they wanted another third-party company to come out and provide some additional unbiased information.
There are some additional steps outlined in statute that the board would need to follow as well to get that to ballot. And I anticipate that the board will get information back from MGT the first part of April. They will process through that. I would anticipate somewhere in that May board meeting, the board will need to make a formal declaration. Statute requires them to open up a 45-day time period for public input and to have 2 public hearings during that time. After that time, they're given 15 days to make a formal vote on what that configuration would look like. I would anticipate that will take place sometime in July in anticipation of possibly putting that on the ballot in November. We would need to get that to the county around August, the beginning of August, so that they could create the language necessary for a possible ballot initiative.
So, Superintendent, that seems like a lot of information and a lot of things for the public, for the Board of Ed to consider. Obviously, the board has a strategy and how they are going to process their information. What would we say to the public or to our employees? What advice would we give them as all of this information is being absorbed and learned?
As I have worked with MGT, as I have looked at their presentation, there seems to be 2 significant variables that hold still for me. And you see them in every one of the possible configurations, because I think they're driving variables. And those are student enrollment, where would it be in the new configuration, what are the number of students in each configuration, and then what direction is that headed? Is that a increasing enrollment or declining enrollment? Because student enrollment really drives the resources available in a district. So that's a variable to pay attention to. How many students in that configuration and what direction is that growth going, declining or increasing? The other significant variable is taxable value. So of that geographical area, what is the taxable value, the property tax? What is the total estimate of property taxes available in that area? We learned from the MGT study that about 24% of our funding comes from property tax, 65% comes from income tax. Income tax is based upon enrollment, property tax is based upon taxable values. So you want to pay attention to not only enrollment, but also what is the taxable value of that possible reconfiguration. And all of them are going up, but what rate are they going up? That would be another source of revenue for a future Board of Education to look at, because revenue drives the programs, the employees that we have. We are in a people industry. A majority of our expenses are people providing services for our students. So those are 2 variables that I would encourage all individuals to pay attention to. And MGT is focused on those 2 variables as well, as you see those evident in their presentation.
I would say one thing that people could get confused on, though, on the MGT variables are the number over to the right, the surplus number. How can that be misleading from what you just described?
Yeah, every configuration is going to have revenues and expenses, and there's going to be a difference between there, and that's either the surplus or the deficit. And I would say, while that's important, it's a minor variable because that could easily be erased or extinguished with further adjustments. That is just the snapshot of what it would currently be, all other variables holding still if we were to reconfigure. But there are so many other variables that will change that. I think the direction of the student enrollment and the taxable value is more important than the snapshot deficit.
So, Superintendent, what advice would you have for somebody who comes and attends one of the public meetings?
Great question. I would say stay open to the information, receive all the information, become informed, and then when you have an opportunity to share your opinion, share an informed opinion. That's what we're asking the board to do, and we're asking our patrons to do, as well as our employees. Just stay open to the information.
Are you saying that the district could stay together?
That is an option. That's the first thing that MG presented, to say you're a very well-run district. A very viable option is to stay together as a district, and that's something the board is going to have to consider. They can't put 6 options on the ballot.
Right. One of the 6 will be to stay together. The other 5 are a reconfiguration of some sort.
Right, and the board needs to decide, are we going to put something on the ballot, and if so, what is that one configuration that we think would be best if we believe that the district needs to be reconfigured.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, to stay open to the process and not necessarily let over-the-fence conversation from neighbor to neighbor be the ultimate factor. Study the information, study what is best for you and your family, and
take the long-term view. There are things that would immediately happen, but we also need to keep in mind, what will this look like in 10, 15, 20 years? How will this affect our grandchildren and future generations that will be part of Alpine School District or a new district?
Okay, before we get out of here, will you recap our meetings that are scheduled next week on the 12th, 13th, and 14th?
Yes. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Each day we'll have during the day meetings for our employees and others, and then each evening we'll have a public meeting. 7 o'clock on Tuesday evening at Timpanogos High School, 7 o'clock on Wednesday evening at Vista Heights Middle School, and 7 o'clock on Thursday evening at American Fork Junior High. And we would invite all of our patrons to come and participate in one of those meetings to hear the information and to share their feedback.
Awesome, and they'll be held in the auditoriums, correct?
The auditorium, yep, we're expecting large crowds.
Thanks for answering a couple of questions with us.
You bet, it's an engaging process.